So I'd like to begin by thanking the organizers for inviting me here to this wonderful conference. So what I'm going to discuss today is some relationship between black holes and microstates. Okay. And I'll explain the objective as I go along. Now, as we all know, in the holographic description of gravity, the fundamental degrees of freedom are those of a quantum theory without gravity, and gravity appears as an emergent phenomenon. And this has been quite successful in describing a non-perturbative quantum definition of a theory of gravity. Nevertheless, it will be useful to quantize gravity on ADS by standard tools like string theory and explore how holographic results could emerge from this. Okay. And if nothing, it could teach us how to quantize gravity in situations where holography is not directly applicable. And what we will plan to do in this talk is to study a version of this problem in which we have extremal black holes. And the reason that holography or ADS factor is important is because extremal black holes have an ADS2 factor in the near horizon geometry. So let me begin by giving a brief overview of how string theory helps us understand Bekenstein-Hawking entropy of black holes. Okay. So the strategy that one follows in trying to understand Bekenstein-Hawking entropy in string theory is the following: that first we identify a suitable supersymmetric black hole with certain quantum numbers, and we simply calculate its entropy, which I'll denote by SBH, via the standard Bekenstein-Hawking world formula. Then in the second stage, one forgets about this part of the calculation, and one finds a microscopic system consisting of d branes and other solitonic objects, which carry exactly the same quantum numbers, and then count its number of states, which I'll denote by omega, in the limit when gravity is switched off. And then one invokes supersymmetry to argue that omega remains the same when gravity is switched on, and compare SBH with log of omega. And one finds remarkable agreement in this comparison. Now notice that I have put number of states in quotes, because as we will see shortly, that what we really need to compute is not number of states, but an index. Okay, but I'll explain this as I go along. Now this comparison is usually done in the limit when the charges are large. And in this limit, the curvature at the horizon is small, and as a result, the Bekenstein-Hawking formula is a reliable approximation. Also, in this limit, the counting of states simplifies, because we can use various asymptotic formula, like the Cardy formula, instead of having to do an exact counting of the number of states. And the question we would like to address is what happens when we go beyond this large charge limit. Now it's clear that on the microscopic side, where we actually count states, there is no difficulty in principle in extending this to finite charges, okay, because the low energy dynamics is usually described by some kind of supersymmetric quantum mechanics, and we can in principle count states to arbitrary accuracy. Okay. And indeed, as was reviewed in Miranda's talk, in a class of n equal to 4 and n equal to 8 supersymmetric string theories, one now has exact microscopic results for the counting of states. Now our goal will be not so much to do this microscopic counting, which, as I said, can be done in principle to arbitrary accuracy. But what we'll ask is it possible to understand these results by directly studying quantum gravity or quantum string theory corrections to the black hole entropy? Okay. And we'll see to what extent we can achieve this goal. So let me begin by giving you some results. Okay. So these are some results for the microscopic index in heterotic string theory on T6. Okay. And these results are obtained by identifying appropriate Fourier coefficients of Siegel modular form, as Miranda described in her talk. Okay. So what I have given in this table okay, are the rows and columns of the table are labeled by various charges. So the index q dot p, so these numbers denote the value of q dot p, okay, where q and p are electric and magnetic charge vectors, and q square, p square, and q dot p are t-duality invariant bilinears in these charges. So on this side, we have the values of q dot p. On this side, you have the pairs of values of q square and p square. Okay. And I have chosen some random values of charges, okay, and this is what you get. Okay, this is what you get by directly analyzing the Fourier coefficients of Siegel modular forms. So as you see that the microscopic results are completely well defined, there is no ambiguity. Okay. And notice that here you are talking about an index, not the total degeneracy. And because you are considering an index, which counts roughly the number of bosons minus number of fermions, these numbers can be both positive and negative, and you see some negative entries here and some positive entries. The question that we would like to ask is, can we reproduce these numbers from the analysis of quantum gravity? Now, indeed, if we want to really reproduce these numbers from the analysis of quantum gravity, we need to compute quantum gravity or string theory corrections to the Beckett-Hawking entropy to exactly. Okay, if you want to get the exact numbers, you have to know how to calculate string theory corrections to the entropy exactly. Okay. And this we will not be able to do today. Okay. We will not provide a complete answer to the problem today because we don't know how to solve quantum gravity in the near horizon geometry exactly. Nevertheless, we will see that we can use the black hole description to make predictions for the microscopic index, which can be tested against the explicit results. So we'll discuss two different kinds of examples. Okay. And these, the first class of examples are what quantities that we'll be analyzing will involve some kind of qualitative prediction. Okay. And this will involve the sign of the index. I'll explain what this means and how black holes predict the sign of the index. Okay. And the second class of predictions that I'll be describing are more quantitative in nature. Okay. And these will involve logarithmic corrections to the black hole entropy. Now, in both of these analyses, okay, the key insight arises from the existence of the ADS2 factor in the near horizon geometry of extremal black holes. Okay, I had already alluded to it earlier that every extremal black hole has an ADS2 factor in the near horizon geometry, okay, and that will be our main ingredient in the analysis. Now, it turns out that ADS2 does not admit any charge or energy carrying excitations, okay, because ADS2 is a two-dimensional space, okay, and even in flat two-dimensional space, we know that if we have a charge, that affects the asymptotic behavior of space-time. Okay. Similarly, in ADS2 also one can show that if we add a charge excitation, okay, or an excitation that carries energy, okay, it changes the asymptotic boundary conditions on the gauge fields and metric. Okay. So once we put an appropriate boundary condition on the metric and the gauge fields, we have no option but to only consider excitations which carry no charge and no energy. So this in turn means that quantum gravity in the near horizon geometry of an extremal black hole describes a microcanonical ensemble of degenerate quantum states. Okay. And this microcanonical ensemble of degenerate quantum states can be identified precisely as the ground states of the black hole in a fixed charge sector. Okay, so this is important that ADS2, by the very fact that the near horizon geometry of an extremal black hole contains an ADS2, okay, it means that it always describes a microcanonical ensemble. Okay, you always fix the charge and energy, and you just count states. Okay, let's see then, based on this, okay, what can we say about the sign of the index, okay, which will be our first test of quantum gravity predictions. Now, first let me explain why index. Okay. The reason that we talk about index is because typically in the microscopic theory, we do not calculate the degeneracy, but an index. Okay. And roughly this index is similar to Witten index, okay. But there is a small difference in the Witten index, okay, which is designed to count supersymmetric vacua, okay, vacua which preserve all the supersymmetries of the problem, okay, you just calculate trace of -1 to the f. Okay. Here, however, you are not trying to count vacua, but you are trying to count BPS states. Okay. And typically, BPS states do not preserve all the supersymmetries. Okay. It preserves only part of the supersymmetries. Okay. So in particular, it breaks part of the supersymmetries of the problem. Okay. And as a result, there are fermion zero modes, which are just simply the gold standard fermion zero modes, okay, which live on these BPS configurations. Okay. So we define this index omega as trace prime of -1 to the f, where prime simply denotes removal from the trace over the fermion zero modes associated with broken supersymmetry. Okay, so we simply remove the degrees of freedom corresponding to these fermion zero modes, and then you take the trace. Okay, and that's the index which one normally calculates for counting BPS black holes. And of course, by spin statistics theorem, -1 to the f we can rewrite as -1 to the 2j3. And the reason that we calculate the index on the microscopic side is because this is what is protected from corrections when gravity effects are switched on. So if this is the case, then clearly for comparison, on the black hole side also, we must compute the index and not entropy. Okay. But of course, the Bekenson-Hawking formula calculates the entropy. And so this is a puzzle you have to resolve, okay, that how can index be compared with entropy. So the strategy is that we try to use the entropy of the black hole, okay, to deduce what would be the value of the index, trace of -1 to the 2j3. And here there are two facts which are useful. Okay. The first observation is that the kind of black holes that you are considering, okay, the supersymmetric black holes, in particular, they preserve 4 supercharges. Okay. So the supersymmetry, together with the SL2R isometry of the near horizon geometry, of the near horizon ADS2 geometry, implies a symmetry algebra, okay, or symmetry superalgebra, which is SU112. Okay. And SU112 has a property that it contains SU2 as a subgroup. Okay. And this implies that the near horizon geometry of the black hole must have an SU2 isometry. Okay. In other words, these must have spherically symmetric event horizon. Okay. Now, this, of course, is known from classical analysis. Classical supersymmetric black holes are known to be spherically symmetric. But this is a general argument as to why spherical symmetry is necessary, is a necessity for supersymmetric black holes in 4 dimensions. So because they have spherical symmetry, okay, they must have 0 average angular momentum. Okay. And now we invoke the second fact that we had mentioned earlier, okay, that extremal black holes describe a microcanonical ensemble. And as a result, average angular momentum also means all states have 0 angular momentum. Okay, because it's a microcanonical ensemble where all the charges, including angular momentum, are fixed. So whatever states the black hole describes, okay, has the property that trace prime of -1 to the 2j3, okay, is the same as trace prime of 1 because all states have j3 equal to 0. Okay, and hence, this is equal to the exponential of the Bekenson-Hawking entropy, which counts the number of states. Okay, because trace of 1 is precisely the number of states. Okay. And this is what explains why the entropy, Bekenson-Hawking entropy for an extremal black hole, extremal supersymmetric black hole, also represents the index or the log of the index of the black hole. Okay. And this is why we can compare the microscopic index with the macroscopic Bekenson-Hawking entropy. Okay, so this is good because this explains why the index on the microscopic side can be compared with exponential of the Bekenson-Hawking entropy. But this analysis also makes a non-trivial prediction. Okay? And the prediction is that omega, the index, must be positive. Okay? Because written this way, there is no reason for this to be positive. But because we know that on the black hole side, every state has j3 equal to 0, this is the trace prime of 1, and that, of course, is positive. Okay? So by equality of the microscopic and the macroscopic index tells us that the microscopic index must be positive. And this is a non-trivial prediction for the index because there is no a priori reason for this on the microscopic side. So this gives a testable prediction for the Fourier expansion coefficients of certain Siegel modular forms, which appear as a generating function for the spectrum of quarter BPA states in various n equal to 4 supersymmetric string theories. Okay. Note that this prediction doesn't depend on which particular theory you are considering. Okay. Any supersymmetric theory, okay, which has at least 4 supercharges on the near horizon geometry will have this property. Now note that this prediction requires us to put complete trust on the gravitational description of the black hole. Okay, the fact that there is an SL2 or near horizon symmetry, okay, is crucial for making this prediction. Okay, on the microscopic side, there is no such prediction that you can derive. Okay. And you notice that a spread of J in J3, even by half unit, will completely destroy this prediction. Right? So you cannot even allow even a minute quantum fluctuation of the angular momentum. Okay. Because -1 to the 2J3 for a half unit of angular momentum is -1, okay, rather than +1, and hence it will destroy this prediction. So this is a strong prediction on the microscopic index, which in principle we can try to go ahead and verify. There is, however, a caveat, okay, and that arises from the following observation, that the macroscopic arguments that we gave, okay, hold for single-centered black holes. Okay, because these arguments are based on the fact that if you have a single-centered black hole, its event horizon is spherically symmetric. Okay, it's forced to be spherically symmetric by supersymmetry algebra, and hence it must have 0 angular momentum. But this does not hold for two-centered black holes, and indeed, in n equal to 4 supersymmetric theories, the total index gets contribution both from single and two-centered black hole solutions. So here is the relation. Microscopic index should be compared with the sum of the contribution from the one-centered index plus two-centered index. And in general, two-centered solutions, of course, have no spherical symmetry. Okay. They can carry non-zero angular momentum. And indeed, they can also give negative index, spoiling the earlier arguments that I gave. So the way to get around this, okay, is to rewrite this equation, okay, by taking the two-centered contribution to the left-hand side. Okay. So here is the relation that we want to use. One-centered index is equal to microscopic index minus two-centered index. And the strategy will be to compute separately the contribution to the index from the two-centered black holes, subtract this from the microscopic index, and then test the predictions from ADS to geometry, which is the positivity of the index. Now, fortunately, okay, the contribution from the two-centered black holes to the index can be explicitly calculated. Okay. And here I have given some formula. Okay. So let's take, for example, a two-centered configuration, okay, where one center carries only a purely electric charge, okay, electric charge Q, magnetic charge 0. The other center carries purely magnetic charge. Okay. And one can explicitly show that the index for this state, this two-centered configuration, is given by this formula over here. Okay. So this part of the formula comes from the quantum mechanics of the relative motion between these two centers. And these two functions, f of q square by 2 and f of p square by 2, are simply the internal index of each of these centers. Okay. Again, you might recognize this. These have appeared in Miranda's talk. Okay. These are simply the index for half BPA states. Okay. So this gives a completely explicit expression for the index of this state. Okay. And furthermore, analysis based on supergravity tells us precisely what two-centered configurations exist at any given point in the moduli space. So you can use this information to compute total two-centered contribution to the index, and then simply subtract from the total microscopic index to make prediction to calculate what the one-centered index is. And then we can try to verify the prediction of positivity of the index on that one-centered contribution. Okay, so here is the same table that I showed you before. Okay. This is the result for the total index, total microscopic index, in heterotic string theory on T6 from microscopic counting. Okay. These are what you get by directly analyzing the Fourier coefficients of Siegel modular forms. The only difference from the previous table is that now this table has been color-coded. Okay. So the red entries in particular corresponds to negative index. Okay, you can see that there are plenty of negative entries in this table. Okay. And then there are also blue entries. Okay, the blue entries represent what are normally known as the negative discriminant states. So one defines a discriminant, okay, as this particular combination of the charges. And you would see that for every negative entry, the corresponding value of delta is negative. Okay, here, for example, q square p square is 2, 2. So this is 4 minus 9. Okay, that's minus 5. So these are all blue entries. And the significance of the blue entries is that there are no single-center black hole solutions with negative discriminant. Okay, so at first sight, these are somewhat of an enigma. Okay, because there shouldn't be any black holes corresponding to these charges. Okay. But of course, as I said, this is not a complete story, because this is a full total microscopic index. Okay, that's what the Siegel modular form gives you. Okay. But now we have to subtract from this the contribution from the two-centered configurations. Okay. And that can be done. Okay. And here is the result, okay, after subtracting the contribution from the two-centered black holes. Okay. And you see that indeed there are no negative index anymore. Okay. There are no red entries. Okay. All the indices which are negative before have turned positive. Okay. And of course, some other numbers have changed because you have subtracted off some two-centered contribution. But all indices are positive as predicted by the black hole analysis. We also see that there are also no negative discriminant states, okay, because all the negative entries, all the entries for the negative discriminant have become 0, okay, after subtracting the contribution from the two-centered solutions. Okay. So this clearly shows that, at least at this level, the explicit microscopic counting does agree with the prediction from the macroscopic analysis, even for finite charges. Okay. Of course, it will be good if you can actually compute these numbers. Okay. But as I said, that requires solving quantum gravity exactly in this background. Okay. But I'll have a little more to say about this later. And this is only part of the story. Okay. As you can see that I have only shown part of the tables. Okay, such tests have been carried out for many other n equal to 4 supersymmetric string theories, okay, and also for many other sets of numbers. Okay. And in every case, one finds that the results agree with the macroscopic prediction, namely that after subtracting of the contribution from the two-centered configurations, okay, the index is always positive. Okay. And one can also prove that the positivity of the index for large charges in all the known examples. A general proof, however, is still lacking. Okay, I know some people are still working on trying to find a general proof, but this is where the subject stands at present, that there is a specific prediction that we can get from the black hole side on the Fourier coefficients of Siegel modular forms, okay, and that in all explicit examples that seem to hold. Now let me turn to a different subject, okay, which will be part of the quantitative tests that I talked about. Okay. And this has to do with studying logarithmic corrections to the black hole entropy. Now, as I said, we know on the microscopic side, we have exact microscopic results for the index in n equal to 4 and n equal to 8 supersymmetric string theories. Okay. So while we can use these exact results to get some exact numbers, as I showed you in the last few slides, okay, we can also use these exact results to carry out an asymptotic expansion, okay, an expansion, okay, about the large charge limit, okay, because that is a limit in which the systematic corrections can be made on the gravitational side. So you can compute systematic corrections to the index omega beyond the large charge limit. And the question is, can we reproduce these corrections from the microscopic side, from the macroscopic side, from the black hole side? So let's see what kind of corrections we are talking about. Okay. So here are the microscopic results in the limit when all components of the charge are taken to be large. Okay, I have taken this limit because this is the limit in which the supergravity approximation becomes valid. Okay, the curvature is weak at the horizon. So it turns out that for n equal to 4 theories, in the limit of large charge, okay, the leading contribution is pi square root of delta. This is the Bekenstein-Hawking entropy. Okay, this has been the main success of string theory explaining the Bacon-Snocking result from microscopic analysis. Okay. And then the corrections that one gets, the first set of corrections that one gets, are of order 1. In contrast, in n equal to 8 supersymmetric theories, okay, the leading correction again is given by the Bacon-Snocking formula, pi root delta. But then the first correction that one gets from the microscopic side is minus 2 log delta. And the question we would like to address is it possible to understand these corrections? Why is there no log delta correction here? And why the log delta correction comes in the specific coefficient here, okay, from the black hole side? Now, another point I would like to mention here is that this result that I have given here is different from the Cardy limit. Okay. The Cardy limit corresponds to a limit when only one component of the charge becomes large, keeping all the other components fixed. Okay. This, in the language of the dual 1 plus 1 dimensional conformal field theory, will correspond to taking the momentum large, keeping the central charge fixed. Okay. In the Cardy limit, okay, the logarithmic corrections have a different form. As you can see, in that limit, even for n equal to 4, there are some logarithmic corrections. M here is the number of matter multiplets. Okay. And for n equal to 4, the logarithmic correction returns the same form. Okay. So this is just to show that Cardy limit is not all that is there in supergravity. Okay. While it is true that the leading result, okay, leading Bacon-Snocking result, can be derived using the Cardy formula, okay, the logarithmic corrections that one gets in the supergravity limit is quite different from what one would get from the Cardy formula. Okay. But our focus will be on this. So what is the strategy for computing the entropy? Okay. And here we use the fact that the Euclidean near horizon geometry has the form of AdS2 times S2 times some compact space K. And besides this, of course, there are also flux through various cycles. Okay. K here is a 6-dimensional compact space of string scale size, typically. Okay. And this is the metric. This is the metric on AdS2. Okay. This is the metric on S2. Okay. And this is some metric on the compact space. Okay. And besides this, there are also fluxes, okay, through various cycles. Okay. And A here is a constant that scales with the charges. Okay. It's a homogeneous function of degree 1 of the charges. Okay. So looking for logarithmic correction corresponds to looking corrections of order log A in the entropy. So here is a picture of AdS2, of Euclidean AdS2. As you can see, this has the shape of an infinite disk. Okay, you can see from this metric over here, because I should have said eta goes from 0 to infinity. So this is an infinite disk. Okay. But as in quantization of all AdS2 spaces, okay, all AdS spaces, you have to put a finite cutoff. So you put a cutoff, okay, so that the boundary has length L, the volume is finite. Okay. And with this cutoff, suppose Z AdS2 is the partition function of string theory in this background. Okay. Then we can identify Z AdS2 as trace of e to the minus LH. H is the Hamiltonian of the CFT1 which is living here. Okay. L is simply the length of this boundary. Okay. And because all states in AdS2 carry the same energy, as I have already argued, okay, this can be thought of simply as the degeneracy of states times e to the minus E naught L. Okay, or e to the SBH times e to the minus E naught L, where E naught is the energy of the states. So using this formula, we can see that once we compute a Z AdS2, we can extract SBH from it. Okay, simply by identifying the finite part of this partition function. Okay. And this is again very similar in spirit to what you heard, for example, in Marino's talk, okay, as to how to extract. I mean, he worked with AdS4, okay, and extracted the finite part of the partition function. Okay. Here instead, we are considering AdS2 or AdS2 times S2. Okay. But the basic principle is the same. We extract the finite part of the partition function, and that's what we should identify with exponential of the black hole entropy. Okay, so here is the formula, and one can show that classical contribution to this gives us back the world entropy, okay, which is pi root delta. Okay, thank you. So we are looking for logarithmic corrections to this formula. And on very general grounds, so one can show, okay, in fact, this doesn't even require supersymmetry. Okay, for any extremal black hole, one can show that if there are any logarithmic corrections to this formula, okay, they will come from one loop contribution of massless fields to ZADS2. Okay, by massless fields, I mean supergravity fields. Okay, fields which will become massless in the infinite volume limit of ADS2 and S2. Okay. So this means that we don't really need to know too much details about the theory. Okay, the logarithmic corrections depend only on the infrared physics. Okay, we need to know the spectrum of massless fields and how they behave in the background, in the black hole background. Okay. So you have to compute the one-loop contribution of the massless fields to this partition function. And this involves two different types of contributions. Okay. First, we have to compute the determinant of the kinetic operator of massless fields after removing the zero modes. Okay. As it turns out, there are certain zero modes of the various fields. Okay. And of course, we cannot include the zero modes in the computation of the determinant. So we first calculate the determinant, and then you have to evaluate separately the contribution from integration over the zero modes. So let me just give a few details of how you go about calculating the determinant. Okay. So to calculate the determinant of the kinetic operator for massless fields, okay, here are the steps. We have to find the quadratic action of massless fields expanded around the near horizon geometry with fluxes. Okay. And this, in fact, is the most complicated part of the problem, okay, because what you are dealing with is a supergravity action, okay, expanded around the near horizon geometry. Okay. And you want to identify the quadratic action of various fields in the supergravity background. Once we have done that, we have to find the eigenvalues of the kinetic operator. Okay. Then we have to take the product of the non-zero eigenvalues. Okay. We have to remove the zero eigenvalues from here. They have to be treated separately. And then you have to simply take the product of non-zero eigenvalues. The zero mode contribution has to be calculated separately. Okay. And the way it is done is to notice that the zero modes are typically associated with the asymptotic symmetries of Euclidean ADS2. Okay, Euclidean ADS2 has certain asymptotic symmetries, and those are the ones which are responsible for the zero modes of the various fields. Okay. So to evaluate the zero mode contribution, we identify the asymptotic symmetries responsible for the zero modes. Okay. Then we change integration variables, integration over the zero modes, to integration over the parameters leveling the supergroup of asymptotic symmetries. Okay. And then we look at the Jacobian for this change of variables, and the A dependence, or the dependence on a charge from the zero mode integration, essentially comes completely from the Jacobian in this change of variables. Okay. And this is what gives rise to zero mode contribution to ZADS2. Okay. So this procedure, okay, is more or less straightforward, okay, although tedious. Okay. And at the end, after you have computed ZADS2, okay, from the zero mode and the non-zero mode factors, we simply have to isolate the infinite part and the finite part separately, because you can calculate this determinant as a function of L. Okay, and that allows us to separate out the infinite part and the finite part. And from this, we can compute the correction to the black hole entropy. Okay. And here are the results. Okay. Now, I've shown you separately the contribution to the bosons and fermions, okay, just to indicate that although supersymmetry is not responsible for the cancellation, okay, because the final result is not necessarily zero, okay, supersymmetry does help in simplifying the final result. Okay, because if we just had, for example, the bosonic part of this problem, okay, it will be a very complicated coefficient of this log delta. Okay. M here is the total number of matter multipliers in the n equal to 4 theory. Anyway, when we add up the contribution from the bosonic determinant, the fermionic determinant, and the zero modes, okay, we indeed find results, okay, which are in perfect agreement with what we saw in the microscopic theory. Okay, we get the total result 0 for the n equal to 4 theory, and the total result minus 2 log delta for the n equal to 8 theory. Okay, and this is exactly what we had seen in the microscopic analysis. So let me see where we can go from here. Okay. So the first goal, or at least it's one of the goals, is to try to carry out the gravitational path integral exactly. Okay. And this may look like a tall order. Okay, how can we integrate gravity exactly? But we know that there must be a nice answer, because on the microscopic side, we have an exact result. Okay? And so it's not inconceivable that somehow one should be able to reproduce that exact result also by working on the gravitational side. Okay? And one of the tools one might want to use here is to use localization techniques. Okay? So the idea is to use to compute the partition function on ADS2 using localization. There has been some progress, but it's still far from achieving the final goal. The second possible generalization is to extend this analysis to n equal to 2 supersymmetric string theories. And here, the main bottleneck is the absence of reliable results on the microscopic side. On the macroscopic side, the analysis is more complicated, but in principle, it can be done as before. But we don't really have completely reliable results on the microscopic side. Nevertheless, one can take the point of view that we will simply try to make progress on the macroscopic side so that eventually comparison of the microscopic data may be made if and when the latter is available. Now here, there has been progress on several fronts. First of all, you have a general formula now, which relates the total index to the index associated with single-centered black holes. And as you saw here earlier, this kind of formula is necessary if you want to isolate the single-centered contribution to the index. Because this is required for testing, for example, the positivity. You have to know what is the contribution of the single-centered black hole. Logarithmic corrections have been computed in some special n equal to 2 supersymmetric theories, which is also known as the STU model. And for this particular model, it turned out to vanish. In principle, it can be extended in generic n equal to 2 supersymmetric string theories, but it's still work in progress. And among various other things, it would constrain, for example, the measure in the OSV integral if the microscopic index is indeed given by something like an OSV integral. Because as you change the measure in the OSV integral, logarithmic corrections will change. And if you have an explicit macroscopic result, then we can certainly put constraint on what the OSV integral will be. Now, in fact, there is no reason why we should restrict to supersymmetric black holes, because the general techniques on the black hole side extend very easily also to non-supersymmetric cases. So we could, in principle, calculate logarithmic corrections to non-supersymmetric extremal black holes like extremal Reisner-Nordstrom or extremal Kerr, extremal BTZ, etc. And these results would put strong constraint on any microscopic theory that attempts to provide a statistical interpretation of the entropy. And here is an example. For extremal Kerr, one can follow the same procedure and calculate the logarithmic corrections. And one finds a logarithmic correction which has coefficient 16/45. And it's not surprising because, as I said, in the supersymmetric theories, these bad coefficients became better after you combine the bosonic and the fermionic contributions. So one of the questions that one might want to ask is it possible to reproduce this coefficient from Kerr-CFT correspondence or some other microscopic theory that attempts to give an explanation for the entropy of the extremal Kerr black hole? So let me summarize then. So what I have tried to argue here is that quantum gravity and linear horizon geometry can make non-trivial prediction for the microstates, which can be tested by explicit microscopic calculation. And I describe two different kinds of tests. This is a qualitative test involving the sign of the index. And this is a more quantitative test, which actually computes the coefficient of the logarithmic correction to the Bekenstein-Hawking-Wald formula in the large charge limit. There are many other tests which I have not discussed here. For example, the analysis of the twisted index, one-loop correction to entropy from stringy states, etc. But that will be subject of another talk. And finally, let me end by a general lesson, which perhaps goes even beyond extremal black holes. The general lesson seems to be that Euclidean quantum gravity or string theory is indeed capable of reproducing the microscopic results in all cases which have been studied. And thus, while we search for a holographic description of gravity in general backgrounds, it may also be fruitful to attempt to study quantum theory of gravity head-on using the known exact results from holography and or black hole microstates as useful guiding principles. With that, I'll stop. Thank you.
Question? Okay, If there are no questions, let's thank Ashok again.